When we look at who leads the forces of chaos, we always think of the Chaos Lord or a Demon Prince. But what about the greatest champions of chaos? That's what we're going to talk about today in another deep dive. But before we get into that, a lot of these are Chaos Space Marines, so I want to get a brief introduction as to what Chaos and Chaos Space Marines are. Chaos in the 40k universe is represented as a malevolent spiritual force that represents the collective psyche of every single sentient being in the Milky Way galaxy. This force coalesces in an alternate dimension known as the Immaterium. In the Immaterium, or sometimes referred to as the Warp, that pooled emotion takes form as a sentient and extremely powerful entity, 4 of which are the supreme ruling kings of the Warp. They are known as the Chaos Gods. These Chaos Gods are the primordial villains, clashing against reality in an eternal struggle to corrupt the Milky Way galaxy. To do this, they call upon the forces of chaos. From demons to traitor space marines, the legions of chaos are many and dangerous. The origin stories of the Chaos Space Marines dates back to the Great Crusade. During this time, the Chaos Gods managed to corrupt the Emperor's favorite Primarch son, Horus Lupercal. Horus was actually the War Master of all of humanity's military forces, a role given to him by his father, who was busy working on the Webway project. This was a project to create humanity's very own path through the Immaterium, just like the Old Ones and the Eldar did. Horus was convinced by the Chaos Gods to betray his father, which initiated a civil war to overthrow the Emperor and gain control of humanity. Horus rallied 9 of his brothers to fight against the Imperium in what became known as the Horus Heresy. Ultimately, the War Master was defeated by his father and his Primarch brethren who remained loyal. Unfortunately, the Emperor suffered terrible wounds when he fought Horus, and ultimately he had to be entombed into the Golden Throne, which became his life support system. Sundered and cast out of the Imperium of Man, having turned their backs on the Emperor of Mankind, the Chaos Space Marines of the Traitor Legions know that there can be no peace for them, no forgiveness, nor absolution. They are wholly committed to the path of damnation, and they have marched it for 10,000 standard years, in hellfire and doom. These genetically enhanced transhuman warriors have all the strengths and skills of their Imperial counterparts, to which are added the powers of chaos and the brutal devotion of their patron Chaos God. The armaments of the heretical Astartes differed little from the loyalist Space Marines. They possess the same primary weapons, such as bolters, bolter pistol, heavy weapons, knives, swords, and axes. However, they do possess thousands of standard years of combat experience, which turns these warriors into unstoppable killing machines. Within every Chaos military force, there exists a position of great power that only a few Chaos Space Marines or Chaos Sorcerers can achieve. It is a rank that offers enormous power and prestige, but one that by its very nature wrecks the warrior with pain and envy. It is the title of the Exalted Champion, a rank that forces a proven warrior to constantly compete against other Chaos Champions for the favor of the Chaos Gods and the attention of their Chaos Lords. Just like any other worshipper of Chaos, the Exalted Champion is sadly just a pawn in the great game. He must not only prove to be a capable warrior and leader, but a willing servant to the Chaos Gods. When he does so, he will be rewarded with abilities far beyond those of his competing champions of chaos. For the most part, the Exalted Champion fulfills a double role in the warband of their master. They are an effective leader in those times when their lord's efforts must be focused elsewhere, and it is common for them to be accompanied by a band of Chaos Cultist retainers and hanger-ons, or a Chaos Space Marine honor guard. More than that, however, the Exalted Champion is their master's executioner, seeking out the leaders of the enemy and challenging them in single combat. And no matter how powerful the enemy leader is, the Exalted Champions are incredible warriors. On top of their experience, which is hard-won over centuries, sometimes millennia of battle, it is coupled with a ferocious thirst for violence and the potent war gear of the Chaos Space Marines. It is further bolstered by the gifts of the Dark Gods. This makes them incredible warriors, a weapon master who could fight toe-to-toe with an Orc Warboss or a Drukhari Archon and emerge triumphant. While gore still sizzles on their blade, the Exalted Champion offers the undiluted glory of victory to their patrons, whether that be the gods or a Chaos Lord. All around them, their warband raises victory cries as they fight on harder as the severed head of the enemy is held up for man and god to see. The process of seeking out and slaying the enemy general or commander is how the Exalted Champion hopes to draw the attention of the Dark Gods. They do so with good reason, at least from the perspective of a power-hungry madman. Each Exalted One understands that every single traitor in the galaxy butchers and schemes for their patron. It is only the ones that conquer and perpetrate the most vile acts that get the gifts of the gods. These warp-given rewards usually appear first as blemishes or stigmata. Then as time passes, these strange deformalities or abilities become ever more pronounced. These gifts of the dark gods might be hideously disfiguring, or even physically crippling, for what the ruinous powers consider a blessing might be seen by mortals as the vilest curse. Those champions who sprout extra limbs, razor-sharp horns, or extra eyes soon find ways to turn their new gifts to slaughter. Many a Chaos Warrior has found such growths to be effective tools in a fight. Because the blessings they receive usually increase the carnage they are able to create, they increase the likelihood that they will be rewarded once more, and so the cycle continues. Should a warrior find themselves with too many gifts, their altered body and genome will reach a breaking point, mutating into a fleshy abomination that is doomed to spend the rest of its short existence in agony and madness. For the few lucky exalted ones that don't become warp spawns, the opportunity to become a Chaos Lord will present itself, but it's up to the chosen warrior to elevate to this rank. Now there are 5 categories of exalted champions recorded by the Inquisition. There is the Exalted Champion of Chaos Undivided, and then the exalted ones allied with one of the 4 major Chaos Gods. The most bloodthirsty and savage of these is the Exalted Champion of Khorne. It lusts over the spilling of blood and the roar of battle to satisfy the desire of his blood god. They are experts in many weapons, but they prefer melee weapons, many of which other champions cannot master. They don't fight in a graceful manner, preferring to bludgeon their way through a number of enemies. Only the greatest battles can sate their endless thirst for blood and death. Now, in a universe where disease and death are the most potent forces in the galaxy, only the exalted champions of Nurgle embody all of these. These exalted ones are swollen and bloated, often little more than moving sacks of pus and infectious disease. Their bodies have been dulled to pain, and as such can endure immense amounts of damage before they even die. And then there are the exalted champions of Slaanesh. The senses of these exalted champions are increased beyond human recognition, and their minds are so fast to react that they fight in a blur, which many enemies cannot even see, let alone defend against. Slaaneshi exalted champions are often the greatest swordsmen in the galaxy. And lastly, we move on to the highly powerful Psykers and Chaos Sorcerers that make up the rank of the mortal followers of Tzeentch. These are the exalted champions of Tzeentch. The enhanced psychic powers granted to these exalted ones allow them to project warp powers which no follower of the Emperor could even dream of unleashing. They often wear charms and pendants to protect themselves from the demonic powers of the warp, although the dangers are lessened because of their service to the Lord of Change. But even these exalted ones fear the entities of the warp. Most often, these exalted champions are merely pawns in one of the endless larger schemes of Tzeentch, but useful pawns are often the best protected. Now, the Exalted Champion is just one of the many great heroes of the Chaos Space Marine forces. We also have undivided Chaos Space Marine leaders known as the Forsaken. In the 10,000 long years since the Horus Heresy, the Imperium of Man has dealt with countless chaos incursions and traitorous revolts that, if left unchecked, would unravel into a sector-wide war. At the heart of these terrible atrocities is almost always the mark of a Chaos Space Marine warband. And it had become easier and easier for the great bureaucratic war machine that is the Imperium to detect and respond to these malevolent threats. It is the Emperor's greatest warriors that are always dispatched to eradicate these traitors before their malice can take root on a world. However, the Imperium has on numerous occasions found itself tricked by the most inconspicuous force. Cultist revolts that in theory should have acted as no problem for a well-trained planetary defense force, but were somehow tactically outmatching the Imperium. They managed to poison planets with little effort. These intentionally mundane uprisings are fashioned by none other than lone wolf Chaos Space Marines. They are known as the Forsaken. Unlike their Chaos-empowered brethren, these heretical Astartes care little for the massive martial maneuverings of superhuman and demonic armies. Instead, a Forsaken is but one mutant demigod who can outmatch the Imperium's greatest commanders, but who is mysteriously mistrusted by his own kind. When a heretical Astarte has been marked as a Forsaken, he has parted ways with his other Chaos Space Marine battle brothers and seeks to complete his own agenda. Generally, these heretics are loners, distrusted by others, and reliant only on themselves. However, they never lack the confidence necessary to complete a task, even if they lack the manpower. A Forsaken must adopt the mantra of becoming the cleverest and most resourceful individual in a mission. He needs to be able to thoroughly research a target and ensure his precise actions will succeed. Though he is always mindful of his own goals and continuously working towards them, these independent attitudes make him more likely to be part of a human warband. The Forsaken are more willing to admit that there are certain tasks that human heretics can accomplish that the Forsaken cannot. They are among the Chaos Space Marines most likely to be found working with non-heretical Astarte warbands and organizations. What makes the Forsaken so unique is that they are drawn to a particular facet of chaos and driven to spread its influence. While this might be a chaos god, it could also be a rogue demon or even a conceptual issue. While these heretics are certainly capable of unleashing their martial abilities just like any other Chaos Space Marine, their abilities are often matched by a surprising amount of knowledge, be it philosophical, political, ancient, heretical, or even sorcerous. It's almost like taking the mind of Dr. Cornel West or Neil deGrasse Tyson and attaching it inside of a Chaos Space Marine body. As a matter of fact, the Forsaken might be more concerned with the message that the battle carries to those who hear about it than the actual success on the battlefield. This thirst for knowledge may even be connected to why the Forsaken has parted ways with his other Chaos Space Marine battle brothers. There are those Forsaken whose goals are completely self-centered. He might desire to become a powerful warlord, or simply delight in expanding his reputation as a lone and incredibly deadly warrior. He may even simply seek the thrill of new challenges and new locales to explore and pillage, or even just wish to pillage and loot his way into wealth like someone who invested into Safe Moon the first week it came out. What actions these heretical Astartes will do in order to complete their goals is as diverse as the goals themselves. They may inspire chaos cults, foment unrest, or carry out acts of sabotage and destructions on the rotting edifice of the Imperium of Man. But another thing that makes these guys so strange is that even if they form some type of cult or subversive organization, these warriors are often too idealistic to become capable leaders and are happy to pass off the direct rule of their cult to someone else. Just as they continuously rebel against authority, they are often incapable of respecting anybody who obeys them. That's why the Forsaken usually have no desire to rule or lead. The only drive that they do have is the desire to destroy, to unmake, or to gain revenge. This drive is usually created by some outside influence that made him originally turn from heretic to a Forsaken. For example, his brothers in arms may have betrayed him, or they may have been slaughtered completely. He might even be a loyalist Space Marine who turned to Chaos and fled his chapter. Now he operates alone and with a carefully selected cadre of like-minded individuals. These others might be humans who have similar beliefs and are willing to discuss them in such a way that the Forsaken is capable of viewing them as near peers. If the Forsaken was betrayed or a sole survivor of a warband, then he's likely to be engaged in a quest for vengeance. The target of his fury could be an Imperial organization, but it might also be a Xeno or even another Chaos-aligned warband, and his vengeance might involve the crippling humiliation or even utter destruction of that target. Because of this, most of these types of Forsaken rarely plan for an existence after the success of their mission. Most readily accept their impending martyrdom as an acceptable price to pay for their revenge. At the same time, because of this, they go to great lengths to make sure that they live long enough to accomplish their goal. This is especially true for those instances where the Forsaken's comrade has been slain. If he still holds a loyalty to his deceased brethren, the notion that he is acting in his name may be a tremendous motivation. Most Forsaken are seldom occupied with the notion of becoming a demon prince, though not against the idea of apotheosis. Their goals are most focused upon their beliefs and their hunger. Now when it comes to being empowered by chaos, the Forsaken do fear the doom of becoming a chaos spawn, particularly if their transformation were to happen prior to completing their task. The very notion of submitting to another's will, no matter the power behind it, is almost always anathema to the Forsaken. Because of the diversity of their mission, and because they're marked as an outcast, the Forsaken are great mercenaries, but at the same time, they are the most dangerous mercenary for any heretical warband to accept. Now personally, the Exalted Champion is probably one of my favorite leaders of all of Chaos, but there's also my second favorite, the Chaos Terminators. The most powerful and venerable of these traitors earn the honor of wearing the corrupted and feared suit of tactical Dreadnought armor, more commonly known as Terminator armor. This advanced form of power armor is a relic of the Great Crusade, a close-quarter melee variant designed for battle brothers that require power and protection over maneuverability. The armor is massively bulky and contains a full array of fiber bundles and adamantium rods to support their heavy Gauss-plast steel and ceramite plates that form the outer carapace. Some of these ancient suits are either stolen or inherited from previous Traitor Marines that fought during the Horus Heresy. Others obtain their Terminator armor from the heretical Dark Mechanicus, who sacrilegiously damn the machine spirits of these mighty armor patterns. And then there are those Chaos Terminators that have worn their armor since the Corpse Emperor walked amongst man. These heavily armored suits of power armor had become widely available by the time the Traitor Warmaster Horus struck at Isvan III. According to fragmented records of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Terminator armor was originally designed to become the ultimate Space Marine power armor, and was originally envisioned to replace the older suits. However, as the Horus Heresy drained the resources of the Imperium, Terminator exosuits became increasingly rare, for they were exceptionally difficult to create and maintain. In addition, during most battles, their bulk became a disadvantage against the light-powered armored warriors who easily outmaneuvered them. These suits were still highly sought after, however, as Terminator armor proved adept at bloody short-range battles waged in cramped conditions such as boarding actions and ship-to-ship engagements, hive cities, and tunnel fighting. After the Traitor legions were driven from the realm of mankind and into the Eye of Terror, suits of Terminator armor became even rarer amongst them, as each legion of the Chaos Space Marines fought one another for dominance in an endless struggle for favor of their patron Chaos God or dominance. Many of their most prized relics and artifacts of technology were lost due to this attrition, and as these heretical Astartes succumbed to the powers of the warp, much of the organization and structure of their former Astarte legions or chapters completely disappeared. Therefore, suits of Terminator armor have become their most prized war gear, carefully maintained and guarded jealously by those fortunate few who have been in possession of these rare examples of advanced technology from a bygone era. Although these are masterpieces of war, the Chaos Terminator armor is as corrupted and twisted as the traitors within. Where once Imperial insignia was emblazed into the armor, leering death heads and the Eye of Horus now stare accusingly at those brave enough to look upon them. Spiked trophy racks protrude from their massive shoulders, the skulls of the enemy a barbaric testament to the wearer's martial prowess. Helmets have grown into bestial masks that sprout great tusks and razor horns, many of which have fused directly into the skulls of their wearers. When twinned with the stomping, heavy gait typical of the Terminators, these adornments conspire to give the impression of a slab-muscled, predatory Hulk searching for its next meal. The war gear of a Chaos Terminator varies dramatically, including weapons taken as trophies from slain foes and arcane equipment carefully maintained since the Horus Heresy. Chaos Terminators usually use ranged weapons, typically a combi weapon of some sort, such as a combi bolter, and they use chain axes, power mauls, and power claws, and other powerful close combat weapons. This deadly combination of devastating anti-personnel firepower and close-quarter fighting makes a Chaos Terminator a deadly and highly feared opponent. Some of these Chaos Terminators carry heavier and more powerful weapons, such as the Double-Barrel Reaper autocannon and the terrifying Heavy Flamer, to provide supporting fire for their comrades. Other Chaos Terminators enhance their abilities in close-quarter combat and wield a pair of lightning claws with which to carve up an enemy, or use a chain fist for cutting through armored vehicles and starship bulkheads. Surprisingly, a Chaos Terminator armor can move and operate with remarkable freedom and agility considering the sheer mass of the actual armor, which provides as much protection as an armored tank hull. With that said, Chaos Terminators are not the fastest of troops when it comes to reaching the enemy's battle line. To counter this, they often employ the use of Chaos Land Raiders as a transport vehicle that can smash open the fortifications of an enemy. This allows its murderous passengers to reach the foe without having to first navigate the fierce bombardment so often arrayed against them. Much like their loyalist counterparts, Chaos Terminators can also be teleported directly into battle from the vaulted hulls of their warships using arcane technology dating back to the time of the Great Crusade, though they are just as likely to use Chaos Sorcery for such a strike as they are this ancient technology. The sudden appearance of a unit of Chaos Terminators within the enemy's headquarters can spell the bloody end of many protracted campaigns. The appearance of a Chaos Champion in Terminator armor is powerful enough to stir up the legions of chaos and push cultists and demon alike into a frenzy of violence. The destructive power of a unit of these warriors is enough to strike fear into the enemy's ranks and send them fleeing from the demonically touched Terminators, whose armor reflects 10,000 years of corruption and war. There have been a few Chaos Terminators that bully cultists into making minor repairs to their armor, which is why distinctive and studded plasteel plates cover much of their bodies. These pieces of scrap plates are scavenged after a battle, and the armor of the slain is cannibalized by the Chaos Terminators, adding to the unnatural and terrifying appearance of these hulking monstrosities. Some of the damage inflicted on a Chaos Terminator is left there on purpose to remind the enemy of their inability to end the warrior's life. A gash across their shoulder pauldron, or hundreds of bullet dents, are all testaments to the unstoppable fury of a Terminator. Many of the corruptive mutations common amongst heretical Astartes take advantage of these open wounds and spread out of the armor itself, allowing horns, spikes, and tendrils to sprout out of the warrior's body, furthering their demonic appearance as the chosen of chaos. The extent of a Chaos Terminator's mutations depends mostly on the Chaos God that they worship, and how much of that God's power is coursing through their body. One of the most grotesque-looking Chaos Terminators encountered by the Imperium is the Blightlord Terminator, which are an entire formation utilized by the Death Guard Traitor Legion, dedicated to Grandfather Nurgle, the Chaos God of disease and decay. These Chaos Champions are bound to their cataphracti pattern armor suits for all of their eternal life. They stalk relentlessly towards the foe's battle lines with their deadly array of virulent weaponry, mowing down the enemy's ranks with contemptuous ease. At last, the Terminators break into a lumbering charge, hefting huge weapons with which to hack and bludgeon the enemy. Flails of corruption entangle weapons and limbs in corrosive barbs. Bubonic axes and bale swords tear wounds into which 1,000 poxes seed. By the time the Blightlord Terminators stomp on in search for a new victim, nothing remains of their enemies but maggot-ridden corpses. Combining the protective powers of their cataphracti warplates with the disease resilience bestowed onto them by Nurgle's gifts, Blightlord Terminators are terrifyingly hard to kill. They take pride in this fact, advancing contemptuously into the teeth of a firestorm, mocking their enemies' attempts to destroy them. This arrogance grates upon the Death Guard brothers, but the Blightlords make such exceptional shock troops that it is overlooked or even condoned by some of their masters. Most Death Guard Victoriums include at least one band of Blightlord Terminators for breach assaults, boarding actions, and sudden teleport strikes. It is rare for a ship of the Plague Fleet to take to the tides of the warp without a complement of the Blightlords aboard. Due to the amount of time they spend embarked upon disease-ridden warships, Blightlord Terminators are saturated with warp entropy. This foulness pours off of them in waves, rotting flesh and corroding metal in all areas around them. Where the Blightlords tread, crawling veins of corruption radiate outward like spiderwebs of rot and rust. An enemy needs only to be gripped by them in order for these energies to start agonizingly eating away at them, while vehicles and fortifications exposed to the Blightlord's presence soon slump and crumble. On many Death Guard warships, Blightlords act as the elite garrison, standing ready to defend the bridge at a moment's notice. During void battles, Plague Fleet captains bring their ships in close to the enemy vessel, allowing massed formations of Blightlords to teleport directly aboard. Like parasites hacking into the body of a luckless victim, the Death Guard Terminators begin their destructive rampage. Bullying their way down narrow corridors and corroding through sealed bulkheads, the Blightlords mercilessly crush the ship's defenders while spreading their corruption throughout its decks. The Blightlord Terminator has become one of the Imperium's most feared Chaos variants, but there is one other Chaos God that favors the heavily armored and ancient warrior. Tzeentch, the God of Change, loves his Scarab Occult Terminators. Following the Thousand Suns Legion's transformation into the Chaos Traitor Legions devoted to Tzeentch, and the enactment of the Rubric of Ahriman, the physical bodies of the Sekhmet, the Thousand Suns Terminators, like many of their non-psychic battle brothers, were reduced to mere dust, the animating spirit that remained possessing only an echo of their once vaunt intellect. They go into battle on the behest of their sorcerer lords now, advancing with an eerie and unsettling calm. Some of these Chaos Terminators' masters were part of the Scarab Occult at the time of Ahriman's mighty spell, and were robust enough of spirited mind to resist its obliterating effects. Others are powerful mystics who have ascended to the rank of the Thousand Suns over many centuries, and through twisted ingenuity, earned a place amongst the vaunted Sekhmet. In these cases, the Scarab Occult sorcerers control the unstoppable force of the warrior automatons, capable of wading unharmed through the masses of lesser enemy infantry. The Scarab Occult's ornate armor, derived from the variant of the ancient Tartaros pattern warplates, ripples with arcane force, sending solid shots ricocheting away and even turning aside the beams of high-energy weaponry. Each suit was a relic of the Legion, but even before the fall of Tzeentch was completed, the Thousand Suns had begun engraving their Terminator armor with profane inscriptions. This desecration continued even after the persecutions against the Sorcerers laid down by the Council of Nicaea, for the Scarab Occult saw it as their duty to guard the forbidden knowledge that their Primarch had collected. The Rubric of Ahriman sealed each warrior inside their defiled armor permanently, locking the remnants of their soul for eternity with the spell words that they had etched on their armor. Over the millennia of exposure to the warp, the true powers of these etchings have blended with the essence of each warrior, creating the Scarab Occult, a hellish twisted warrior cabal. The Scarab Occult's armor has retained much of its potency over the long centuries since its creation. Refractor field generators have become saturated with warp energy, causing the air around them to wither as incoming fire is deflected harmlessly. Each suit is also capable of withstanding the pressures of teleportation, allowing the warriors of the Scarab Occult to emerge suddenly onto the battlefield through holes torn into reality. The ubiquitous weapons of the Scarab Occult Terminators is a cruelly curved blade based on the Khafesh of ancient Prospero. The earliest Khafeshes were forged from the scant pieces of precious metals found in their barren world, and were symbols of authority used to mete out punishment to those who disobeyed Prosperian law. When the Thousand Suns Legion came to Prospero, the Khafesh were adopted by the Scarab Occult as a mark of their rank, and they were fitted with power field generators to allow to cleave matter at a molecular level. Though the warriors of the Scarab Occult are but ghosts of their former glory, the deadly speed and skill with which they wield their blades in close-quarter combat has remained very potent. The Scarab Occult Terminators bat away the assailants' blows with contemptuous sweeps of their power casheps. Sadly, although the Scarab Occults were once counted amongst the most powerful mortals in existence, their independence is long gone now, and they serve only the Sorcerers' fiends in their midst. Although the Thousand Suns and the Death Guard Traitor Legion are the only two Chaos factions that have solidified a Terminator variant, there are many more reports of other Chaos warbands modifying and thus creating unique Terminator armor. It is also no mystery why the power and protection of these Terminators is sought after by most Chaos warlords, which is why the greatest leaders of the Chaos forces are always seen donning the ancient pattern of power armor. Since we're on the topic of equipment or armor making a Chaos Space Marine a whole lot stronger, let's talk about Chaos Dreadnoughts. Just like their loyalist counterparts, a mortally wounded Chaos Space Marine can be saved by placing his body into a cybernetic sarcophagus that contains multiple life support technologies, often at the hands of the Dark Mechanicus. This sarcophagus is then placed within the armored form of a combat walker that the sarcophagus's inhabitant can control using neural impulses. For the Loyalists, this is simply a Dreadnought, but for the heretical Astartes of a Traitor Legion, this is known as a Chaos Ferrum Infernus Dreadnought. Many of the same procedures are performed for this pattern of Dreadnought, and although it is easy for inexperienced Imperial forces to believe that these massive war machines are hellbrutes, the Ferrum Infernus Dreadnought has not undergone any of the mutational processes that are common amongst the hellbrutes. This fate is often given to those heretical Astartes that have proven to be capable warriors, but have not gained the favor of any of the Chaos Gods. And while entombment into a Dreadnought is an honor for a loyalist Astarte, most Chaos Space Marines do not see this fate as an honor at all, but as a destiny to be avoided at all cost. This is because being trapped within the armored shell of a Dreadnought, while being enforced with the powers of Chaos, drives the Chaos Space Marine insane, and transforms the resulting Ferrus Infernus Dreadnought into an unstoppable and incredibly bloodthirsty killing machine, losing all sanity. As a result, far from being revered for their wisdom and experience like their Imperial counterparts, all Chaos Dreadnoughts are shackled securely when not in combat, because the crippled Chaos Space Marine within them is driven insane by the millennia of being trapped within a cold cybernetic sarcophagus as the powers of Chaos warp his mind and spirit. They are used as insane behemoths to trample the enemy and are regarded with caution, as the madman within the Dreadnought can turn his wrath upon his comrades if there are no enemies within range. It is exactly this unreliability that led Abaddon the Despoiler to call for the creation of the Defiler as a replacement for the Traitor Legion's Dreadnoughts. This is also why most Chaos Dreadnoughts carry within them the maniacal remains of an Astarte warrior that dates back 10,000 Terran years ago. As they are not wise or even reliable by any standards, Chaos Dreadnoughts are usually designated as fire support or frontal close combat assault units, rather than elite warriors. They are also armed with similar weapons as their loyalist counterparts. These include Dreadnought close combat weapons, such as claws or energy-infused whips or flails, or twin-linked autocannons, las cannons, and heavy bolters. Chaos Dreadnoughts are also sometimes fitted with multi-meltas and plasma cannons to provide enhanced armor-piercing abilities, but often prove erratic or unstable in combat, and as a result, few Chaos Space Marine warbands will make use of them unless there is little other choice, and will prefer to use other, more reliable demonic engines. Now, another overlooked Chaos Champion or great hero is actually something that might not even be a Chaos Space Marine, the Chaos Sorcerer. Chaos Sorcerers are mortal men and women that ascend to demigod status through unspeakable pacts forged with the Chaos Gods. While the majority of the psychically gifted champions of Chaos were once Space Marine, not all Chaos Sorcerers have to start out this way. Any psychic being driven to expand his influence and knowledge through the Dark Arts can obtain the blessings of one or more of the Chaos Gods and become a Chaos Sorcerer. Once blessed with these new powers, the Chaos Sorcerer can wield death, destruction, and mutation at the end of his fingertips. Unlike the Sanctioned Psykers of the Imperium of Man or the Witch Farseers of the Eldar, the Chaos Sorcerer's power is incredibly deadly. They can orchestrate planet-wide rituals and manifestations that tear at the fabric of reality and allow the demons of the warp to bleed into real space. And on top of commanding warp-spawned armies, the sorcerers themselves are exceptional warriors. They draw upon the enemies of the warp and bolster their martial prowess in terrifying ways. On the battlefield, a sorcerer can weave complex spells that launch malefic bolts of warp lightning to entangle and dismember his enemies. They are the complete embodiment of the brutality of the warp. Anyone unlucky enough to face a Chaos Sorcerer is fighting a truly potent champion of Chaos. I'm going to end this deep dive with one of your guys' favorites, Nurgle. What does a Nurgle champion look like?
Those warriors who dedicate themselves to Grandfather Nurgle and somehow are able to attract the attention of the Lord of Disease and Decay are some of the galaxy's toughest and most filthiest beings in existence. And to describe a worshipper of Nurgle as the filthiest, it truly means grotesque to the point of revulsion. Now we all know that each Chaos God has their own vanguard of warriors that lead their demonic legions into battle. Most of the time, these champions are former Space Marine battle brothers whose superhuman bodies are manipulated by the ruinous powers to create godlike soldiers capable of going toe-to-toe with some of the greatest demons of the warp. The champions of Nurgle, however, take their potency to a whole new level, as their god turns them into the embodiment of disease and decay. Little more than moving sacks of rotting flesh and bacteria, these great warriors are immune to the damage that would normally kill a Space Marine. They proudly serve the Blightlord Nurgle and ensure that every planet they invade feels the terror of inescapable plague and then the blessings and the embrace of Grandfather Nurgle. Relatively few of those who receive Nurgle's glorious blessings distinguish themselves as much more than a tiny but welcome maggot, doing their part to eat away at the rotting corpse that is the decaying universe. Those who do manage to stand out from the smelly and disgusting lot of Nurgle worshippers will most always receive the most mutations. These 6 souls will exemplify the ruling principles of Nurgle's philosophy, and thus emulate his grand and corrupted form at a level that leaves no doubt as to which of the ruinous powers has claimed their souls. These are the Plague Father's mortal champions, and it is through their foul deeds that many of the greatest accomplishments of Nurgle's plan are achieved. Every hive planet struck with a pandemic-level pathogen that murders the vast majority of the population, or every agri-world polluted with crop-killing plagues is orchestrated by one of Nurgle's great champions. So often these champions take on an appearance not unlike that of their dark patron. This is not unusual for minions of the Plague Father. Great Unclean Ones, for example, the greatest of Nurgle's champions, are said to be small, though massive in their own right, versions of Nurgle himself. And in turn, their excreted offspring, the Nurglings, look like miniature replicas of the Great Unclean Ones that gave them life. Likewise, mortal champions become bloated, stinking, leaking collections of rotten flesh, exposed entrails, necrotic sores, and all manner of foulness. They are surrounded by clouds of flies and followed by Nurglings that splash about in the slime trails that spread out behind them to mark their passing. Entire polluted ecosystems encompass the champions of Nurgle. Wherever they step foot, viruses and bacteria will flourish. Unlike the minions of the other Chaos Gods, champions of Nurgle do not hesitate to pursue enemies into the most dank, disgusting, and polluted places. There is no cesspool or sewer noxious enough to deter Nurgle's followers. Not even quarantine plague zones are off-limit to these grotesque monsters. This terrifying reality makes the champions of Nurgle some of the most resilient warriors of the entire galaxy. Marching into battle and conquering planets that most other Chaos factions would consider lost or unattainable. Once a champion of Nurgle has a scent for his foe, no amount of stink can throw him off. This determination that is part of Nurgle's lessons serves this champion well, as they do whatever needs to be done to serve their lord. Champions of Nurgle will swim through pools of flesh-melting acid, fly through clouds of lung-collapsing fumes, march over the rotting corpses of their fallen brethren, all to make sure that their Plague Lord's blessings can be shared. Lesser worshippers of Nurgle who follow these champions into the battlefield are unfazed by the grotesque conditions of these great warriors. As a matter of fact, other devoted followers draw inspiration from the morbid beauty of their rotting forms, the sickly sweet odor of their rancid flesh, and the corruptive acts they commit in the name of Grandfather Nurgle. The Plague Lord's champions all end up mimicking his appearance in some way or another. Curiously enough, some of these champions were drawn to the worship of Nurgle because they started out life bearing some passing resemblance to him. The simple fact that a child was born with some abnormality, like an exposed organ or even whooping cough, is enough to draw the kind attention of the Great Unclean One. However, Nurgle is more than form. He is also a philosophy. Most mortal champions and many lesser followers end up thinking like he does, though in a limited fashion due to the constraints of mortal minds. But it is the demonic champions that know their father's thoughts the best. These demon champions of Nurgle are the nearest to their god than any mortal, and more closely involved to his plans than any other demonic servant. But the beauty of the society that Nurgle cultivates is that there's little place for jealousy or scheming in the gardens of Nurgle or any of his domains. And his champions know this. Though they wish for nothing more than to be one with the Plague Father, they also know that they will never be as close to him as the Great Unclean Ones, the greater demons of Nurgle. And as they do with so much else as a result of Nurgle's teachings, they accept their lot. This relationship to their god differs from that of the other champions. The other ruinous powers take particular pleasure in deceiving mortals, damning them by tricking them with lies and promises they will never have to keep. They see these demonic followers, even the champions, as never having a choice but to do as they are commanded. They view these champions more as slaves to darkness than co-conspirators with it. In their eyes, this makes mortal servants somehow more interesting than the demonic. However, Nurgle knows most of his mortal followers turn to him as a last act of desperation, but his demonic minions, most especially the Great Unclean Ones and the Champions, have a genuine affection for Grandfather Nurgle and serve him out of love. And Nurgle delights in reciprocating, reminding him as it does of some kind of cycle, and therefore takes great interest and pride in the efforts of demonic champions. The desires of Nurgle and his champions are one. Each knows that the great corruption is a higher purpose that must be served, and they do so with great resolve and satisfaction.
Now those are just some of my favorite Chaos Lords and Leaders. Those are just some of my favorite Chaos Champions. There are more that I'm going to... Now those are just some of my favorite Chaos Champions, but for this deep dive, that's all we're going to cover. Stay tuned for more. Now those are just some of my favorite Chaos Champions and Leaders. More to cover in the future. If you guys like this video, hit the like button for me. Comment down in the comments section below if I forgot one or you want to see a video for another one. Let me know what it is in the comment section below. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. This is Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.